Up next on Inside the SCCA, Solo Nationals History. On this episode of Inside the SCCA, we're talking Solo Nationals. We're talking about the 50th anniversary of the Solo Nationals. Started way back in 1973. For those who are what they call 100%ers, I won't tell them how old I was in 1973. But let's just say I wasn't there. Speaking of 100%ers, joining us on this episode is a man with a name most of the people in the club know, a face many of them know, and a voice they're going to get to know here, Rocky Entriken. How you doing, Rocky?
I'm doing fine, Brian. How are you today?
I'm doing real well. Welcome to the podcast. Hall of Famer. You've been to every single Solo Nationals. They call you a 100%er, and I understand that is a fairly exclusive club.
It's a pretty small. There's only 7 of us, and I expect all 7 to be here this year.
Yeah, this year's a pretty big deal, right?
Well, anytime you hit 50 or something, it's a big deal.
Right. So it's the 50th. It's 50th consecutive, right? There hasn't been a break, right?
Well, there was the COVID break in 2020.
Okay.
But this is the 50th event. I guess you could say it's the 51st year, but it's the 50th running. I like it. It's like what Indy does with their races. You know, this one coming up is what the 116th running or something like that, because they were interrupted with the war years.
Sure. And not only are you a Hall of Famer, not only have you been to all 50, you did some road racing as well, right?
Exactly.
Okay, and you are probably the preeminent historian of all things SCCA at this point, right?
Well, a lot of SCCA and certainly a Solo.
Sure. Because you were at one point in time...
I keep track of the runoffs, too.
I say you, at one point in time, you were the club archivist, right?
No, I never was that.
Okay, I thought that was one of your titles.
That started with Harry Handley and went through a couple of other people.
Got it. All right, so before we get too deep into your background and your story, before we get to the story of Solo Nationals, I start every show with the same question. And that is, how did you get mixed up in this crazy sport that we all love?
I got to blame my brother. I had, in 1965, I'd taken a tour of Europe with a program that put us all on a chartered plane in Washington, D.C., and took off for the continent. I don't know why, but when the plane came back, it landed in New York City. And my brother lived there at the time. And I had 2 weeks before I had to be back to college at University of Kansas. So I crashed with my brother. And he said, "We're going to an autocross this weekend."
And what year was...
I replied, "What's that?"
What year was this?
1965.
Okay.
So he took me to an autocross. Next weekend, he took me to another one. Next weekend, just before I had to leave, I finally got up to Cars to ask if I could drive his MGA.
Okay. So do you remember, for those folks who from the New York region who watch, and I know we have some, do you remember where those autocrosses were?
Oh, yes. It was Mitchell Field on Long Island. The event was put on by a club called Team X, which is one of these by invitation only groups. And Buck was a member.
Yep. And I think that's now called Roosevelt Field. So was Mitchell Field, was that MacArthur at the time, or was that what is now MacArthur, or was that what is now Farmingdale?
No, that's it was Hofstra University's property.
Okay,
so Hempstead.
Yeah. So it is Roosevelt Field. I believe that New York Region Solo still runs their solo events there today.
Well, I remember it was a hell of a site, so that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, very cool. So it was an MGA, and how did you beat your brother the first time?
His comment was, "You won't beat anybody," but we had a 21-car class, and I finished 12th.
Nothing wrong with that.
And I finished 5th.
There's nothing wrong with that. So.
Oh, I felt fine. And there is one funny story about that too, if I want to. He had a friend in his club. Don't know if he's still around. His name was Sam Moskowitz.
Okay.
And next time he saw Sam, he said, "Sam, my brother beat you in the autocross." Well, yeah. No, I figured he's your brother and all. Well, that's the first time he's ever driven my car. Well, he's your brother and all. That's the first time he's ever driven an autocross. And as for me, I went home to Lawrence, Kansas, and bought the Spitfire.
Okay. So that was going to be my next question. You went right into a Triumph Spitfire.
I did.
And how long did you autocross that?
I last time I drove an autocross with it was 2011, maybe early 2012.
Do you still have it?
Oh, yes.
Is there any chance it's going to...
It's looking for a home in the museum right now.
I was going to say, is there any chance it's going to make an appearance at the 50th running of the Solo Nationals?
It will, but it will be in the museum display.
Got it, okay.
They have already arranged that I'm going to leave it. There's going to be a display there of things of the history of the runoffs. I'm sorry, of the Nationals. And it's in one of those buildings just off the entrance to the site, and my Spitfire is going to be there.
So was that
was
that the Spitfire that you drove in 1973?
It was. I bought the car in '65, and I've never sold it.
Okay.
It's still there. It's out in the garage now.
So what's your best result with the Spitfire?
Probably the one I can brag about the most is my Solo 1 National Championship, which was the first year of Solo 1. That was 86. And I finally got me the first place trophy. That was the Olympics of autocross. And the internet or the U.S. Olympic Committee got mad at us because of that.
Yeah, they're pretty...
I have an Olympic medal, by golly.
They're pretty proprietary with their naming.
Well, and I think SCCA wasn't really aware of that because they didn't argue the point.
Yeah, exactly. So how many events did you do? How many nationals did you do in the Spitfire?
I
approximately
think at least 37 or 38.
Okay. So, and you've been to all 50. What did you race for the other, what is that, 13?
Well, since the last time in the Spitfire, I've been driving a Mazda Miata.
Okay.
A 99 for a few years, and then what I had now is a 2000, still an NB. And right nowadays... No, I'm just trying to hold off last place.
There's nothing wrong. Just showing up is good.
I love being there
and doing your thing. So,
yeah.
And then you've also done some road racing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, my I autocrossed the Spitfire first. From '65 when I bought it. Thing almost seemed to break. Oh, my computer just binged on me.
That's all right.
The thing almost seemed to break around August or so. So finally in '71, I gave it to Buck, who by this time had moved to Lawrence, Kansas, and had an auto shop of his own going on.
Okay.
I gave my car to Buck and I said, make this a race car. And I'll take it back in 3 years. And meanwhile, go road race it. So he turned it into a race car and got it to the runoffs twice. And then in '74, I got it back. In '73, for the first Nationals, I drove my daily driver Pinto in G stock. But then since '74 on up through 2011-ish, it was always in the Spitfire and always in prepared class.
Got it.
By now it's full race.
Sure. Now, did you race the runoffs at all?
Once. In my last year of really competing the Spitfire, I should say I was always a regional racer back in the days when they had regionals and nationals. And I ran regionals several times, kept trying to win the Mid-Am Championship. Finally did a couple of times. Got my 2010 shirt on here. But for 2011, I looked at my wife and I said, just once, I want to do a national season and go to the runoffs just to say I did it.
Right.
No, fully expecting to be DFL, just had the happy to be here guy. And it was beyond expectations, totally. I did 5 national races. I finished every one of them. I had a problem at the end of every one of them. I took the car back to Jesse Prather's shop, who really kind of kept on fixing what I broke. And the great thing about that is that when I got to Road America for the Nationals, I had an absolutely trouble-free week, while guys in the same paddock area as me were just flogging on their cars all week. And a guy in another Spitfire changed engines twice, never even got to race.
Wow.
So I was out there, and I could say I was the top Spitfire at the 2011 Nationals.
How many Spitfires were there?
Well, there were 3 entered.
Well, that's
but
good.
I was the only one that started.
Okay. So
the real thing, I should tell you that, as I said, it was beyond expectations, because I figured I was just going to hold off last place or not. I started 20th, dead last.
Yeah.
I finished 11th.
That's fantastic.
And my key was it was a wet track.
There you go.
And I like the wet.
That's awesome. So you won a Mid-Am championship in what? The Spitfire was H production at the time, right?
Let's see. I won 2 of them.
Okay.
In 2006, I won it, and that was the last year
of G.
that my car in Autocross was G prepared, and in road racing was G production.
Okay.
In 2010, it was an H production car.
Got it. So, I mean, the Mid-Am region, I just got back from Hallett for the Super Tour. There are some pretty stout production cars in the Mid-Am region. So to win a regional championship or a divisional championship in that region in production, that's nothing to sneeze at.
Well, no, one of the things I really like is that national season I finished 3rd. I'm the points keeper here in the Midwest Division. And so I've been sending trophies to race drivers years and trying to win one of my own.
So you saved the division $20.
The hell I did. I bought that damn trophy.
No, but you didn't have to send it to anybody.
Well, that's true. Yeah. But I am so proud of my little 3rd place leather seat stool.
That's great. That's great. So in 2011, you were at the runoffs and at the solo nationals, right? Because you said you've done all 50. So how many drivers have qualified for both, have done both in the same year?
I couldn't tell you really how many drivers have done both, but I can look at my book and tell you how many have won in both sides.
Okay. Just because I can't imagine that most people who are going to attempt to get to the solo nationals and to the runoffs try to do it in the same year.
Not most. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, they'll try to run the events the same year. That's not that odd.
Okay.
Try to win the events.
Okay.
That's something else again.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
And what got me to creating a category in my record book about that was really when Eric Pearl did it.
Okay.
And I want to tell you, he was so proud of that solo nationals one.
Yeah.
Which he did driving for Bob Tennell in Tennell's car. And I remember next year, Tennell was griping at Eric saying, just because you missed the strategy meeting. Tennell was one of the guys he beat.
Sure. Of course. So, What you said your Solo 2 Nationals is kind of your crowning moment. But you've got to imagine over 50 years at Solo Nationals and doing everything you've done, you've got some stories to tell. What's your best what's your best story from those 50 years?
Oh my goodness. I haven't even thought about that as a best story.
Or give me one of them.
Give me one of them. Okay. Well, I don't know. Didn't you mention you were going to go into the beginnings at the first?
Yeah, we're going to get to that in the second half hour. So
let me just talk about the beginnings because it's a pretty good story.
Sure.
I went to that one in my Pinto because Buck was still racing the Spitfire that year. And first event was really not that great an event. Most of us only got 2 runs on a course. The short course, he had long course and short course. This is at a racetrack in Wentzville, Missouri, Mid-America Raceway. And the long course, you drove backwards on the track until you got to turn 7, and they sent you off on this series of slaloms until you got to turn 1 where there was a box turn, a box finish. How many people know what a box finish is?
I don't know. I don't know what a box finish is.
A box finish is you get to the finish line and there is a box of cones. You got to stop without going outside that box.
Oh.
And all of those cones are live.
Okay.
So I do remember, I think it was Marv Schoenfeld in his pink Corvette coming up. He was determined he wasn't going to hit the brakes until he hit that finish line, and he buried that Corvette in smoke.
And did he hit the cones?
Then when the smoke cleared, there was a pylon laying down.
One?
I think just the one.
Wow.
I can't remember if it was leaning against the fender and he backed up or if it went all the way. But so I get out there, and I'm thinking the same thing. I'm not going to stop until I hit that finish line.
Yeah, how'd that work for you?
The finish line. So first of all, we're at the start. The timing didn't work. They had a mile of wire between the 2 lights.
Okay.
Somewhere there was a break. So they ended up with a walkie-talkie. Guy at the start, 1, 2, 3, go.
Uh-huh.
And the guy at the finish punches the watch.
Sure.
And so I'm so focused on him saying 1, 2, 3, go, I forgot the little detail of get some revs up. And I hit the gas and so that probably cost me. I finished 9th and I probably could have gotten a 5th out of it.
Sure.
But I'm up and down, up the hill, down the hill, and back up the hill. And I'm just on the last one. My jacket sleeve catches the tongue of the seatbelt. And I go through that last turn sitting on the gear shift level.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I get up to the top. Okay. So now I get my other run, and I come through it. I'm all coming through it pretty good. And I say, I'm not going to stop until I go through it, past the light. I hit that finish line. I'm not going to get stopped. I throw it sideways, and I am right up against the row of pylons. I've got to back up a little bit, go forward a little bit, back up a little bit more before I can get myself pointed to where I could even get out the pylon they pulled out of the way for me to escape. And I was worried about the next car coming up the hill.
And while you're doing all that backing and all of that, is the clock still running?
No, I'd stopped the clock by then.
Oh, okay. They just had to count a lot of pylons.
Then they had to remove a cone so the guy can get out of the box. But I couldn't just turn and drive out without hitting a cone. So I had to back up to give me enough room.
That's good stuff.
There's my first Solo Nationals. Sports car asked me to go cover it, and I did. And then I said, well, I'll do the second one. And, well, I was chairman of the third one. And then I've had the sports car gig ever since.
So 50 years ago, 1973, well, I guess it was probably 72 if you skipped 1 year, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in 1972, when you're doing that first one, any ideas, any thoughts that 50 years later or 51 years later, you would be at the the 50th running, and you would not have missed any of them?
Well, now actually 53 was the very first one.
Okay.
Because in 52,
70.
72?
Yeah.
73? In 72, the Solo Board decreed that every division would put on a divisional championship. This was because they were going to do a national the following year.
Got it.
And at that time, doing the divisional was the qualification to do the national.
Got it.
Didn't have to do well, you just had to do it.
Exactly. But back to the question of 50 years, did you ever think that, I mean, a lot of life can happen in 50 years. You can have a broken car, you can have...
I don't think in the 70s that was really an issue. It was mostly a case of, it's not that far for me. I'm in the middle of Kansas.
Right.
My longest total in nationals was Columbus, Ohio.
Sure.
For me, 16 hours. And there were people coming from the coast, 2 or 3 day drive to get there.
Right.
So in the 70s, it was just, sure, I'll do it. And by the time it got to the 10th one, and we began to pay attention to who had been to all 10.
Right.
And I think we were still under 2 dozen at that point.
Wow.
It was, we're going to keep on doing this. And so there were, like I say, a couple dozen of us who, by the mid 80s, began to call ourselves 100%ers.
Okay.
That quickly, the number got down to where there was few enough to count.
Right. So, and there's 7 now, right?
There are 7 left right now.
And how long has it been at 7? Do you know?
It's been at 7. I think the last one we lost was Bill Lane.
Okay.
And I'd have to look them up, but I can tell you when we lost Bill. No, Phil Alsbach was the last one we lost. Excuse me a minute while I peek into my book.
So for those who are wondering,
Bill Lane was the last one. We lost him in 2010.
Okay.
Phil Alsbach we lost in 2001.
So people know what the book is you're looking at. Tell us about that book.
The book. This is my record book of the Solo Nationals.
Okay.
You see, it's a fairly thick tome, but this started out because Sports Car sent me to cover the first one. They sent me to cover the second one, and I began to realize, there's no press guide to this thing. If I want one, I got to make my own.
Sure.
Wasn't too long before people discovered I had these records, which at the time was nothing more than the records of what everybody did, what I now call the alpha list.
Sure.
It looked kind of like this, as you can see them in there.
Yep.
And this is the list of every finish by every driver who's ever run the Nationals.
So for those of you who might not watch...
Right there, that's Kathy Barnes right there. You see some people who've done a lot and people who've done just one.
Right.
They're all there. And I started keeping that. I think it was Roger Johnson who first asked me if I would print him a copy.
Yeah.
And so, with my little dot matrix tractor feed printer, I ran him off a copy. Someone else asked for it. And I began making a book that was a loose leaf binder.
Sure.
And started selling it.
Yeah.
For a little bit more than what it cost me to buy the things and get it printed at the local coffee shop.
Right.
And it was only about 3-4 years ago I discovered Amazon would let me do this.
Yes.
So
yes.
Now I have this nice, pretty paperback book that I'll sell anybody. And like I tell people, I'm not paying the mortgage with this thing. I might knock off a couple of entry fees.
There you go. So everybody who's ever run at the Solo Nationals, their name is in that book, right?
Their name is in that book, no matter how famous or obscure they are.
So I'm hoping this year to go to my first. and do the
Well,
podcast.
next year you'll be in the book.
That's what I'm saying. I'm going to wait till next. I was going to buy the book this year, but I might just wait till next year.
Well, you buy the book this year if you need it for the reference.
Yeah.
You buy the book next year because this is the one you put on your coffee table to show everybody you're in it.
That's cool. That's pretty cool.
No, I did. By the way, I might just throw in almost a little commercial right in here. I just got the information yesterday for Amazon that they're raising the prices to print the book.
Uh-oh.
So my price is going to go up $5 in the middle of June. If anybody is thinking, I'm going to get one for this year, do it now before the middle of June arrives. You get the cheap rate.
All right. And we'll put the link in the show notes so you can just one click right to the book. We'll get that in there in the next 24 hours or so for those who are for those who might be watching.
That'd be wonderful. But you can. It's easy enough to find if you just get Amazon.com and then on their searches put solo stats.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So before we go in and talk more about the 50 years and how everything has changed and what you've seen, because you've seen it all, you're kind of like that commercial for some insurance company who says we know a lot because we've seen a lot. Can you give us a little history? And I know you can because you just told me that you've got an upcoming article in Sports Car. What is the origins of solo?
The origin of solo is totally not SCCA.
Okay.
This was a game that was played on a very tight regional level. Most metro communities, I found out, from the starting about the mid-50s and up into the 60s, had their sports car councils. I started in 65. I was living in Lawrence, Kansas at the time. I was a member of the Kansas City Triumph Club.
Okay.
Well, they put on events. The MG Club put in events, the Sports Club, the Corvair Club, the Corvette Club, the Mustang Falcon Club.
Mm.
Yeah, they had two things. And the Mustang Falcon Club is where I first ran an event called the Americana. And I should tell you a little bit about that in a while. Or don't forget to bring me back to it.
Okay.
Anyway, there were all of these clubs, and to coordinate them, you had a council, the Kansas City Council of Sports Car Clubs. I mean, when I ran the event out in Long Island, there was a New York Council, New York Area Council. When I met the people from California, there was NCCA and SCCA. NCCA, Northern California Council of Sports Car Clubs.
Sure.
And et cetera.
And
you found these all over the country.
And there aren't many left. One of them is the Midwest Council of Sports Car Clubs. That was one of my things that we did when we lived in Wisconsin.
That would have covered the Chicago, Milwaukee area up around that.
Michigan and Indiana. Yep.
Huh?
Michigan and Indiana. So it was those 4 states.
So, and that's pretty much where it was. Of course, they all had their own rules. And if you go from one club to another, the rules were always different. I mean, you got me running against TR6s here. I only ran against midgets in the other club. But that was pretty much how it was. And SCCA was a very minor player.
Right.
And some places they were members of one of the council, the local region might have been. In other places, we're a race club. We don't do that stuff.
That's still that way today. There's a lot of regions where their solo club, Cal Club, is part of that. Where their solo club is almost like it's a completely different organization.
Well, I mean, the best example, the newest region. You know what the newest region in SCCA is?
I don't know, but you're going to tell me.
It's AZ Solo region. They even put solo in the name, and it's essentially the same kind of area as Arizona region, but it's geared to the solo guys.
Sure.
And there are clubs that are my club, Salina region. We're strictly a solo region.
Right.
We don't have a racetrack.
Right.
But since I've been playing on both sides of the fence, I get down to the races too. I'll be at a race at Heartland Park this weekend.
Right. So tell me about that first event you did with the Mustang Falcon Club.
I went there, and they put on an event. They called it Americana. And it was, if you can imagine, if you take the Indy Speedway, only at the turn 1, 2, and turn 3 and 4, you got a whole lot of wiggle in it to drive through. That's Americana.
Okay.
One guy starts here, one guy starts here. You drive the whole course. First one back wins.
Oh, okay.
I love that event. The only problem with it was a single elimination event, which means half of the entry got one run.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would stink.
Yeah. And I said, that was a ton of fun, except for that one run stuff.
Right.
So, several years later, 72, I think, no, 73, 72, I put on the first Americana in Salina. And I said, I got to give people more than one run. And what I came up with was, first of all, everybody gets practice. One run from each side, so they get an idea of what the course is like.
Sure.
Then I make it a double elimination tournament. So at minimum, everybody gets 4 times on the course.
Okay.
Well, I put on 30 of Americanas over the years. Mostly, from 72, 70, 73, and 74. I didn't in 75 because I was doing the national, but the chairman of that. And then from 76 on up to the 30th one, I did one every year.
Sure.
And people just loved it. They'd come from all over. We began a Kansas Solo 2 championship, and it was the keystone event of that. The biggest entry I had was 129 cars. It took me 2 days to run the event.
I bet, yeah. Especially when you got to give them at least 4 runs.
So but people like the idea. There's no clocks. We don't even drag out the clock. First guy back to the line wins. What did we do about pylons? 3 pylons for free.
Okay.
You can hit 3 pylons with no penalty. Number 4 is a DNF.
Oh, well, there you go.
But what if I hit 4 and he hits 5? The guy that hits 5 loses.
There you go. You just got to hit less than the other guy.
And we tried to make it as rule friendly. The judges, I got 2 judges outside the course. They are looking across at each other, and they decide who wins. If they disagree, we don't discuss it. Rerun.
I love it.
Which really is very seldom you get a rerun, but there's 1 or 2 at each event.
Absolutely. I would just say a rerun to get another run.
Yeah, because since there's so few, it doesn't take that much time to do it takes more time to argue the fact.
Sure. All right, so let's go back to the first solo nationals.
Going back to the start, I was talking about the councils. Vern Jakes was a fellow down in San Diego region who his idea was he wanted to bring hill climb to his region.
Okay.
And with a rule set, and he pitched it to the Board of Governors, as it was called then.
Sure.
And they came back and they said, yeah, and why don't we throw in these little slalom guys into that basket too? So Vern Jakes, who was not thinking autocross when he started this, and frankly, he didn't think that the autocross guys would even care about it. He was wrong. And he said he was wrong in a story he wrote some years later. Really was kind of tongue-in-cheek. But he invented the concept of a national rule set for autocross.
Okay.
And from that, it just went from almost nothing to, okay, Vern, you're going to be head of the solo board. Next year, Mark Reynolds was the solo board head. A couple of years later, we're going to have divisionals every place. Next year, we got a national championship. So in about 5 years, we went from nothing to a national championship setup.
Wow.
People really jumped on it.
Yeah.
And SCCA went from a nothing in the world of autocross to really the driver of what autocross became. Because we are the preeminent, autocross body at this point.
Sure. So going back to the first nationals, what was the What was there a lot of excitement about it? Was it did you wonder if anybody was actually going to show up? What was kind of the idea going in?
I think probably both, depending on who you're talking to. You wonder if anybody's going to show up. St. Louis region figured they might have 100 cars. They got 224.
That's a success.
And they came from both coasts. We had guys who won the event, came from East Coast, came from California. One of the champions came from Hawaii.
Wow.
We got to say, the car didn't. The car was in a garage in Oklahoma. But he was an Air Force officer who caught a flight, came in, got the car, dragged it up to St. Louis, and won a championship with it in B modified. Chuck Van Nostrand was his name.
In the origins of autocross, Gymkhana or whatever we called it back in its various iterations, wasn't it a very popular among military men?
I think it became somewhat popular. I don't have a whole lot of background to say it was this or was that, but I do know that one of the things that made sports cars such a thing in this country were the GIs who brought MGTDs and TCs back from merry old England after the World War II was over.
And the fact
this was the type of guy who gathered in that living room in Connecticut in 1944 and formed the Sports Car Club of America.
Right. And a lot of the races at that point in time were done on Air Force bases. Because
those kind of came a little later.
Okay.
Actually, the earliest races were things like at Watkins Glen. That track didn't exist then.
Right.
Watkins Glen's first road races was on, I believe it was a 6-mile layout that drove on all kinds of roads around this little village and through the main street of this little village. And it literally ran on every surface imaginable, including dirt, including brick, including jumping over some railroad tracks.
Wow.
They arranged to stop the trains so the race could go on.
That's cool.
And and the only barriers were hay bales along the side with people standing right behind them.
Different time, huh?
Oh, it was wild, And a lot of your earliest road races in the 40s, this is what you were getting.
Wow.
And then when those sites began to go away, because people started doing things like running into the hay bales and what was behind them.
Right.
And people, some people got killed doing it.
Sure.
So you got to credit a certain Hall of Famer that Air Force people would know about, General Curtis LeMay.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one who said to the SCCA, guys, I got these airports that mostly we're not doing anything on them. I'd like to put on a road race there. And so there were several races run on Air Force bases, and that is, of course, ultimately what got Curtis LeMay into the SCCA Hall of Fame.
Yep.
And I think he also won the Wolf Coronado.
Sure.
So anyway, we began really as a racing club, but we didn't get into the autocross side of it until we started until Vern Jakes, and we began to have a national program on that. And very quickly, as I say, we got to nothing to a national championship in about 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So at that first national championship, was the feeling that this was going to become an annual event after the success of getting 200 cars?
I think the whole intent was at that time it would be a national event. I think the solo board of the era intended, because they're in effect copying the runoffs.
Right.
The runoffs began informally, kind of unofficially in 1964. The first one at Riverside, and then the second one at Daytona, or maybe it's the other way around.
Right.
I forget. Were technically just runoffs, unofficial races, and only in retrospect are we considering those winners of those 2 years to be the road race national champions.
Sure.
64, prior to 64, your national champions were done on a points basis of races all around the country, not just road races, hill climbs too.
Oh, okay.
And other time trials and whatnot. There are all kinds of things that worked into the history of it. John Fitch, who was our first champion in, I want to say 56 or somewhere around there. He's a name most people in the SCCA don't know today. He was very high up in the SCCA at the time, but the only way you'd know the name John Fitch, and maybe not the name, you ever come to a bridge or a overpass where you got all these barrels sitting out in front of the bus? Those are called Fitch barriers.
They are.
Fitch. Yep. And he was our first national champion.
He was an engineer who spent his career working on making the world of automobile stuff safer.
Exactly.
And a lot of what he did, those of us from New York region, John Fitch is our legend. He would come to Lime Rock all the way into the early 2000s. That's where I met John. And just the sweetest man you've ever met, I got to tell you.
I'm jealous of you. I wish I could have met him.
Yeah. So,
so the solo championship idea, I think, hey, these road racers got this thing they've been doing for 10 years or so. We can do that. So, boom, we had a championship. And I'm sure that the intent all the way through was that it would be a continuing event. What surprised me, I will tell you, was that the first one really, it wasn't that good an event. Our paddock was dirt and gravel. We didn't even get to start running till afternoon on Saturday because the solo board came in. They hated the course and they changed the whole concept, built the whole thing. And there was so much reinventing on the lot. I was afraid that people might get turned off. They didn't. We went the next year to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Chicago region put on the event, and there were over 300 entrants to that one.
Really? Because I grew up in a little town just outside of Lake Geneva, and I had no idea that the Solo Nationals were in Lake Geneva.
Yeah. And in the 74, I want to dig up a little number here if I can find it. There it is. Yeah. And, Mid-America, we had 224 cars.
Okay.
Geneva had 249.
What do you have info on where the site was there? I'm just curious.
The site was Lake Geneva Raceway.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Are you familiar with it?
I am, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Most people, I'm sure, aren't. So if I may, Lake Geneva Raceway was just a little small oval, flat, absolutely flat, with a drag strip running up the middle through the ends of the oval. The course, and on one side, I should say, the paddock was this gravel lot, looked like about 2 stories up, hidden behind a concrete wall that was right beside one side of the oval. The other side was just grass over there.
Right.
The course started on the drag strip, went over next to the wall on the oval, to the far side, came back down the drag strip, went around the oval on the other side, and then shot off to the runoff area of the drag strip. And I will tell you that in driving 49 solo national championships, the only place I ever hit 4th gear in my Spitfire was that finish shot on that drag strip.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool.
But that was also, solo board changed the course that year also.
Okay.
And because the start went right next to that concrete wall.
And
the solo board pulled the course as tight to the inside of the track as they could to get it away from that wall. And then just to prove that they were right that time, I kind of wonder about the first one, but that time they were right because at least 2 cars still got into the wall. It was wet. It was raining.
Sure. Sure. So how many different locations did the Solo Nationals, or has the Solo Nationals been to over the years?
We've had 11 nationals. Most of them have been airports.
Right.
A few others. Mine was the first airport course. I say mine, but I was chair of the 75 nationals. And I went into that one with a goal in mind. The solo board would not come and mess with my course.
How'd that work?
Actually, very well.
Okay.
The event was in October. I told the solo board I wanted to do this. They were afraid I'd go out and practice the course, or that we'd have people doing it.
Right.
And I had promised them, I said, Salina has maybe 2 SCCA members. The other guy's a race driver. He doesn't care about us, and I will just promise on my firstborn, I won't go practice the course. So they let me do it. We went and set up the courses in May, tested them out. We ran cars through them, not at speed.
Right.
We ran cars through them slowly just to make sure they fit. We didn't really have a good angle on that. But
right.
The idea of setting up the course ahead of time and running cars through it and then painting it down so we knew where the course was several months later has now become the standard operating procedure.
Sure. And do the course designers today compete?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They all compete. They usually don't drive the tests. The tests would be driven by people like Howard might go out, when he was in charge. He'd go out and take a hot lap through the course and probably wouldn't drive the event. Or if he did, he'd do for a while, SCCA had a staff challenge going on where staff members were not allowed to compete.
Got it.
So they could jump in as a exhibition entry.
Sure.
And so he could do that. Mostly, it's like I say, that was the way that we got the idea of doing it and doing this pre-test ahead of time. That was me doing it for the first time in Salina.
Right. So how has the format of the event changed over the years, or has it?
Oh, it actually has quite a bit. Those first events were just weekend events. You show up Friday night, you run Saturday, Sunday, and go home. It wasn't until we got past the Dallas events. We've had the first one in St. Louis, and the one in Lake Geneva, mine in Salina. The fourth one, we were at the Ohio State Fairgrounds, Columbus, Ohio. Number 5 was Dallas, Texas. 6 was Hutchinson, Kansas, on a racetrack there. Airport turned into a racetrack. 7th went back to Dallas. That was for the 70s. In 1980, it came back to Salina, and the entry was getting pretty good by then. I got to look it up here. The entry was up to 353 in 1980.
Got it.
And we're saying it's hard to get this many cars through 2 courses in 2 days. It's so funny because nowadays we're doing just about that number as a regular thing. About 350 or so per day is what we're doing now every time.
Right.
But back then it was a little bit harder. So in 1980, they went to 3 days. We'll do it Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And the way they got 3 days in was you ran one course in the morning, the other one in the afternoon.
Sure.
That lasted through 2 more years back in Salina. Kansas City region was chairing the event then. And then we went back to Chicago in 82, the 10th anniversary. It was going to be a big deal. And we ran on what I got to say was the only real parking lot of something that's really been a parking lot sport.
Sure. And where was that at?
Marriott's Great America Amusement Park.
I've been there many times.
Yes. And we had the same format, 3-day format, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And of course, that's where everybody first was introduced to the Chicago box.
Okay.
Everybody knows pretty much what a Chicago box. Most people don't know where it came from, but Chicago region had 3 of them on one of the courses at that event.
So for those who might not know, tell us what a Chicago box is.
A Chicago box is basically a 3-cone slalom.
Okay.
Only you build a box around it, and it becomes this visual thing where you don't want to go slide through, and some are long, some are short. But But to get through the 3-cone slalom, you get intimidated by these 24 cones that are surrounding it, when actually you should just ignore them.
Right. Cool. Over the years, how have the courses changed?
They become looser. To start out with, the early events, they were trying to do 2 separate concepts.
Okay.
Usually it was a long course, the short course, the tight course, the loose course, or something like that. And there were these group of loudmouths out in San Francisco. And I might mention I was raised in San Francisco. I love those guys. But we heard time and again, that's not how we do it. And as anybody who with a little time in this game might imagine, one of the chief loudmouths I speak of was John Kelly, who brought a lot to this sport. And he has the Solo Cup and he has some other things, and he is ultimately deserving all of them. And he was also a #1 curmudgeon. And he was a good friend of mine for many, many years. So I can say that.
Well, as a card-carrying member of the Curmudgeon Club, I like that.
Yeah, we kept hearing that San Francisco does it in this different way, which is really nothing more than, let's just have 2 courses. One over here, just different. What happened was in '83, Charlie Clark was going to be chair of the Nationals, back at Salina again, Kansas City as the host again, and he invites San Francisco to come out and co-chair with him. And they ended up with Mary Rice, who was a 10 or 11-time champion now.
Sure.
Came out and was co-chair with Charlie. And they did a lot of things, especially courses, like San Francisco likes to do it. And people began to realize, yeah, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so the idea of just 2 good courses is become the pattern nowadays. But in the early days, they got away from the big, little, fast, slow, and stuff like that. So that's mainly it. I was just trying to think of one thing, and it just jumped out of my mind right now. But I was saying, one of the courses here in Salina, after we went to the old airport, I remember there was this fella who had this beautiful Porsche 914 that he ran, Gary Walton. He came out and was the chair one year, and he had courses. You're looking at gates 10 feet wide, 15 feet wide, whatnot. He had gates 40 feet wide. I mean, you talk about what they liked, what San Francisco liked was find your own line.
Sure.
A 40-foot wide set of slaloms or gates or something like that really lets you find your own line, because there was still, no matter how tight or how wide that gate was, there's still only one good line through that corner.
I was just going to say, find your own line is great if you know what the right line is and no one else does.
And this was before we got to course design a la Karen Babb and Roger H. Johnson.
Right.
And you know those names, of course. Hall of Famers both. I used to love to go on Roger Johnson's courses and find his traps.
Okay.
No, I'm not even sure he'll admit that he set traps. But one of my favorites was he would set a course, like say just a simple U-turn, right?
Sure.
And you put a pylon up here, and then you put another pylon over here, and you do the U-turn. Then he pulled this pylon and pull it in, which people arriving at it would come up and pull it too tight and mess themselves up for the other half of the turn.
Yep. Yeah. So Rocky, as we're coming up on the clock here.
Okay.
We could talk for hours, and I suspect that I'm going to have you back on for another podcast down the road here, because there's a lot more I'm sure we could get to. But we're heading to Lincoln here in a couple of months for the 50th anniversary. What are you thinking about when you think of 50 years and you get ready to go to Lincoln? What are you looking forward to this year?
I think I'm looking forward to the mob scene. No, we have hit the maximum once. We had 1,375 people.
Wow.
At the event in 2018, and 2019 it dropped off a little. 2020 we didn't have it, and that kind of put a bit of a damper. So 21 and 22 we're trying to get back to that. If any year is going to push that entry limit, it's going to be the 50th anniversary. And this is why I've been telling people, when that third tier registration opens, I thought it June 29 or so, you better be on your computer sometime before about 6 or 7 o'clock that evening. You might find that thing filled in one day.
Yeah.
Which happened in 2018.
Sure.
So don't think maybe I'll go, I'll think about it. No, sign up now, you can always cancel. But
So for someone who's considering making their first trip, what advice do you have for a noob like me? I haven't run any kind of solo consistently since 1980 something, when I ran like half a season, and I just figure if I'm going to go and cover it, I might as well put an entry in and run it.
Absolutely.
What kind of advice do you have for someone like me who might be making their trip for the first time to the 50th anniversary show?
Go to enjoy the event.
Right.
Don't go thinking you're going to do anything heroic.
Oh no, I have no competition
there. You, especially the noob, the guy even the guy who's been to autocross in 3 or 4 years or something like that.
Yeah.
You're not going there to win a championship.
Nope.
You're going there to be a part of an immense and incredible happening. And enjoy the event for what it is. Watch other people, learn things. But don't be disappointed if you're sitting there, in 40th place in a 42-car class.
Yeah, my only goal would be to not finish DFL.
Well, you know something, if there's 80-some classes, and if you take the ladies that'll stand empty, maybe about 72 to 75, there's going to be 72 or 75 champions. There's going to be 72 to 75 DFLs.
That's true.
And DFLs can have just as much damn fun.
Oh, I'm going to have fun regardless. I'm going to have fun regardless. So,
I think you talk about our 100%ers. I mentioned Bill Lane, who is no longer no longer with us, I don't think. But and he probably bought more different cars. I love the year he brought a Daewoo.
Wow.
Yeah. He also had this wedge-shaped Lotus 11 that just looked like a doorstop.
Okay.
And he ran most of the years in CMOD or whatever. But he just loved being there. And that was the reason he came. He probably finished last more than any other person I know. And he didn't care. It wasn't important where he finished. It was important that he enjoyed himself.
Yeah, that's all I really want, is to be part of the experience and meet some fantastic people and maybe get to hang out with some 100%ers and, maybe at the 100th running, if I run the next 50, I can call myself a 50%er.
Well, we've got something coming for that.
Okay.
Yes. The 7 of us have gotten together and made it known to the organizers there needs to be a recognition. There already is for the 25 people. People have run 25 events.
Right.
And I always credited Bill Lane coming up with that because he was the most unassuming guy. But this, to me, is his legacy.
Sure.
For the thing. He came up with the idea of the Silver Circle. Silver Circle is a guy who has run 25 events.
Yeah.
We'll have about a dozen or so more added to that list, which I forget. It's more than 200 on that list now.
Okay.
But for the 50-year people, we're going to have the Order of the Golden Cone.
Oh, I love it.
And that will be the 7 of us. There can't be another one for another 2 years before someone else is eligible.
Okay.
Then it's another 2 years before one more person is eligible.
Well,
and then it's not, and it goes on like that. So this is not something you're going to see every year.
no,
People hitting 50, but the 7 of us, I think we're all just trying to outlive each other.
well, for me to get to 50, I would have to run all of them, and I'll be 103 at my 50th. So I don't think that's going to happen, but
Well, it might not, but you got a shot at the Silver Circle.
Yeah,
go for it.
Absolutely. Rocky, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Well, Brian, I have enjoyed it. Like I say, I could keep you on for another hour if you wanted to.
Well, we will get back
it's
together.
fun. I got too many stories to tell.
So, for those of you who are solo fanatics, we're going to have 5 more shows like this leading up to the Nationals to talk about everything going on. And down the road, let me go through. I'm going to have Karen Babb, Kathy Barnes, and Bob and Patty Tunnel.
Oh, perfect.
They're going to be one of the shows. Mark Daddio is going to be another show. Sue Anderson, Dick Berger, and Charlie Clark, a couple of other of the 100%ers, are going to be on the show. And then
got the person who's won the most among the 100%ers, person who's won a bunch, and the person who's won none.
Yep. Roger Johnson is going to be another one. And then our final show, which is going to be kind of a preview show, is going to be, as I like to refer to him, as the reigning driver of eminence, Larry Lefty McLeod. He's going to come on, and we're going to do just kind of an overall preview of Solo Nationals. So we're going to spread them out over the next few months, so we can ramp up and get people excited about the 50th. And you're the first, and we now have the foundation of the history of the run of the Nationals. I keep saying the runoffs, the history of the Nationals, and we're just going to build on that and have a good time. So, thank you, sir. Enjoy.
Very welcome. Thank you for having me.
And I look forward to, if all goes well, clanking a glass together in Lincoln in early September.
Oh, absolutely. I'll be down there in the Chiefs Row someplace.
All right. So that's going to do it for another episode of Inside the SCCA. If you like what you're hearing, subscribe to the Racingwire Podcast Network so you won't miss any episodes. It'd also be great if you leave a comment, especially if it's a good one. You can follow us on social media to find out who our next guest is. Leave some questions on Twitter. It is @RacingWireNet. There's a new episode of Inside the SCCA every Wednesday night live on YouTube. And then also every Friday morning is the replay on the podcast. I'm Brian Bielanski. Have yourself a fantastic weekend. Stay safe and go play with cars.
Hi, I'm Dorsey Schrader, and this is Inside the SCCA.
Inside the SCCA is a presentation of the Racingwire Podcast Network and Rural 15 Productions. This podcast is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Sports Car Club of America. The views expressed within are those of the host and our guests, and not that of the SCCA.